President of Finance for the Board of Directors, and I'm also the very, very newly elected President-elect. I especially thank everybody for joining us today on what for many of you I know is a snow day. So some of you are probably calling in and maybe the only one in your office, or calling in while everybody else is out having fun. So thank you for that as well. Hopefully the charge of this review committee won't really come as a surprise to anyone. And I say that for two reasons. One is because over the last few years, the office and the board have shared a lot of information with the membership about how we've really seen an evolving demand from our members of what type of information we share as content. So when we think back to 10 or 20 years ago, much of our content was delivered only through our annual meeting. As we've gone through the years, we've started to add more off-cycle meetings like tech transfer. We've started to add more publications, and in recent years, you've really seen a huge increase in the number of journal articles, newsletter articles, and webinars. So we've really tried to diversify the way that we bring content to our members. The most recent of those have been blogs as well as media chats where our members have been able to share information. It also shouldn't come as a surprise because this charge was really developed from feedback we received from the PAC members. One of the things that we started to see over the last few years is a lot of interest in some of the PACs expanding what their role was. So really starting to think about how they can be a player in developing that new content and not just thinking about the annual meeting, really trying to individually as PACs expand their own scope. We took that feedback and really started to think about what does that mean for the organization? How can we standardize that across all of the PACs? And I think most importantly, one of the things you'll see in the recommendation is how can we as an organization support that, both through the infrastructure that we're able to set up and also through resources. How can we really take our membership dues and reinvest those back into different ways that we are sharing content with our members? So with that, I'm going to introduce Paul Kyle to give him a chance to share a little bit about what the organizational chart is currently. Paul?
Thank you, Jack. Again, I'm Paul Kyle, and I was the co-chair of this work group. Welcome, everyone. This organization chart should be familiar with most of you, but just to help you get a context of what we're tackling as far as initiative and recommendations for the committee, they'll give you some context a little bit. And so across the chart, you can see there's specific roles that each individual, like the president, president-elect, and past president, have certain roles they have within the PAC. Then we have the actual PAC groups, group 1 through 6 shows right now, and each one of those groups are in charge of certain subject matter as far as content, and again, primarily for the annual conference, but also it could bleed over into SIM or tech transfer content. The group 7 should come up. There you go, the little animation there. And group 7 is kind of one of those mysterious groups sometimes for individuals, and what do they really do? Well, over the years, their primary focus has been to develop workshops that might be subject matter that was passed through one of the other groups saying, you know, we need to have a workshop on FERPA. And so that group was in charge of really developing that and putting it together and make sure it's available for the annual conference. Sometimes they would be charged with other things, but their primary role has been that workshops. And so we felt like they had the capacity to do some of the things that we want to do regarding some of the recommendations from the work group. Again, as Jack talked about, this is in response to surveys and focus groups and task force as far as wanting more content and different forms. And so that'll kind of give you a context because we're really focusing on Group 7 from here on out. And so I'm going to pass it on to Emily, and she'll talk a little more detail about Group 7 and the recommendations. Emily?
Thanks. That's a wonderful introduction. So I'm Emily Shandley, and I am currently the chair of the Information Systems and Technology PAC. And that's a wonderful segue, Paul, into the slide that I'm going to walk through one of 4 recommendations that our group is making that really revolve around Group 7. And as Paul was talking about, our Group 7 traditionally or currently has a chair or one member that works really closely with ACRO on workshops and special sessions for the annual meeting. And as our group was moving through our discussions about how we could deliver content that meets the needs not only of the annual meeting, but more broadly outside of the annual meeting for SEM and for Tech and Transfer, and then also through the web and other methods of content delivery. We also wanted to make sure that we were covering the competencies and the proficiencies that are important to our membership. And we saw the role, the expansion of Group 7 as the way to accomplish that goal. So moving on to the second recommendation here that we have, besides the expansion of Group 7, this goes into a little bit of detail as to what that expansion will look like. And we are proposing that beyond a chair for Group 7, there would also be 6 new group content coordinators. Now, this does not replace the current group coordinators. These are in addition to the group coordinators. They would work very closely with all of the coordinators that you're currently familiar with. And their role would be to move between Group 7 and each of the current groups to be looking for content that we could move out to webinars, that we could be publishing online, different ways of delivering alternate content to our membership outside of the annual meeting and in addition to SEM and Tech and Transfer. And we have 2 additional recommendations that we formulated as a group that I will pass along to Steve to illustrate more.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Seaworth, Executive Director for Global Programs here at Wake Forest, and in addition, chair of the International Recruitment and Marketing PAC. The next recommendation that we were able to make, and it was been mentioned before, but I think Jack and Paul mentioned it, is obviously it was important to include SEM and Tech Transfer in the discussion and actually to have either the chairs or their designees join Group 7 as well. Historically, these 2 conferences source their content fairly individually, and there wasn't kind of a back and forth of information. So having them in Group 7 now allows them access to the content that the PACs were creating, but in addition, it allows the PACs access to what SIM and Tech Transfer are talking about. So it really creates kind of a 2-lane highway of content, which had never happened before, and those of us, especially in the PACs, are excited and hope that can occur. The 4th broad recommendation would be no surprise to anybody, is that with all these changes coming and the addition of all this content and traffic of content would be what kind of resources would be needed. And it was clear that ACRO would have to commit both financial and human resources to make this happen. And so to start that, and we know this is going to be an evolving process as we kind of go down the track, we recommended that ACRO have these new content coordinators that Emily mentioned come to the leadership meeting each year in addition to the PAC chairs. We think that will be very interesting to get the conversation going. And also for them to create some staff support and probably financial support as well for the newly put together Group 7, and a couple of those things that we've been thinking about are monthly virtual meetings as well as face-to-face meetings. And I think it will also have to do with technology. Obviously, there's going to be some technology requirements that are going to have to be dealt with at some point along the way. So with that, I will turn it now back over to Paul for a couple of comments on the recommendations.
Thank you, Steve. And so currently, if you look at what we have in place is there's a lot of focus on the annual meeting and program, and we do a super job regarding that content and delivery, as well as SIM and transfer tech. We have engagement limited to committees. Seems to be focused on just the committees rather than a larger focus. And then the content limited to sessions. And so we feel like it needs to go beyond that because a lot of our membership do not have a chance to go to the annual conference or tech transfer or some of our other conferences. In some cases, never will, just because of travel budgets and those kind of things. So we have a lot of membership that want our content to be able to help them with staff development and their own professional development and to help their institutions and ultimately their students. And so to expand that capability, after the restructure, it'll produce content year-round. So we're really going to focus on this new group to be able to produce content all year round and not wait till annual conference or transfer tech, but to focus throughout the year. And that can help us to be real relevant as far as information and content out there when it happens, rather than wait till, oh, the annual conference, we'll talk about that. Well, there might be an opportunity to do a webinar or whatever else that's really current, that's come across higher education and we need to deal with. Greater engagement with the ACRO office and the membership. So we see a real great marriage of a gap there that they can begin to work together closer and support. So if this group or other groups have a great idea and need infrastructure and help, they can get that from the ACRO office, and vice versa. ACRO office can utilize that group for content experts, which they need. The content expanded into courses, webinars, and articles, and we've kind of been hit and miss with that. But we feel like this can, again, fill that gap where we can be more mobile and more responsive to our members, no matter who they are, regarding content and articles and things that they need to help them with their day-to-day operations. And then the content aligned with the competencies and proficiencies, and we want to make sure that we focus on that can really be helpful for those individuals that do participate. They can really focus on, well, these are the competencies that I'm personally gaining or is actually helping with my office and content there. And so the consistency and the ongoing and the rich content throughout the year, we really believe this could really help that move forward. And so with that, I'll move it over to Jack.
So before I start in, I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions or if there's things that you feel like you haven't gotten answers to yet or want more information on, go ahead and type those into the discussion chat box and we'll pick those up and answer those for you. So the next piece I wanted to talk about was what are our next steps? So where do we go from here? The first piece that you'll start to see is as we move to February, we'll actually do a call for volunteers for these content coordinator positions. And I want to reference that back a little bit to one of the points that Paul made. When we think about the content that we're creating, we're really thinking about a lot of content that's facing people who may not be able to make it to our annual meeting or to the other events we sponsor through the year. One of the things that we've reflected on as the leadership of the organization is we have that same opportunity void for folks who want to be engaged in a leadership way in the organization but can't regularly travel to the annual meeting. The opportunity to be engaged on some of these content areas really opens up the opportunity for a number of people across the country to be engaged in ACRO in ways that they weren't able to before. It really opens up a new line of volunteer opportunities for folks. So we'll do a call for content coordinators in February. In March, in preparation for the annual meeting, We will do a selection of those coordinators. And the other piece we'll be working on in February and March is really trying to dedicate a staff member or staff members from the office that can start to work on this content with us. So ones that can really start to build that meeting schedule, think about what the interaction is going to be at leadership, and really get this off the ground and running. At annual meeting, we'll also do a really similar format where we'll answer questions, give a little bit of a presentation to the PAC members and the PAC leadership at the Sunday meeting right before the annual meeting starts, at the Sunday afternoon session. So we'll be able to really let folks think more about what questions have come up, be able to address some of those, be able to get feedback, and really think about how do we evolve this. This doesn't need to be a black and white, we change on a dime. This is really an opportunity for us to expand what we're doing and how we're serving our membership, and the way that we do it will really be able to evolve over time. That new Group 7 is going to meet for the first time at annual meeting, and then that's really going to kick off their ongoing monthly meeting schedule. And then they'll re-engage at the June leadership meeting when we bring that new group together. And then once again, not just with the PAC leadership, but with all of ACRO's leadership, we'll have conversations at the June leadership meeting about how this seems to be working, the direction we're going forward. Part of that also ends up being, what are the support structures we need? What are the funding pieces that we need beyond just the staff member? So are there other resources that the PACs or the group content coordinators feel like they need to be successful in their roles? So with that, I will open it up and start to look at some of the questions that we have coming through.
Yeah, and so far we just had a comment, although it was an excellent proposal, speaking to what you said, Jack, about additional resources that we might need beyond staff person. And you had just typed up that having a sort of collaboration space for the committees would be good.
So we're getting some really great feedback around some of the things that we can do from the office to support the PACs. One of the things we've talked a little bit about is, are there opportunities for us to think about how do we get our content out? How do we bring content in? So one of the things that we've talked about with this committee and also as the board is, are there opportunities for us to build stronger partnerships with other organizations that we feel like we could bring content from? So if, for example, EDUCAUSE is an expert or has expertise around a topic, do we need to reinvent the wheel, or can we work with them to bring content in that we can share with our membership? And that really gets us to a point where it does start to allow us to think about how are we sharing that content. It's an opportunity to think about journal articles. It's an opportunity to think about webinars where it's not just ACRO sponsoring webinars, but it's partnering with other organizations to do that. We've done that a little bit around GDPR with incredible success and incredible crossover, where entire institutions brought multiple offices together to be part of those sessions.
That's great. And then Elizabeth Morgan asked, and it's a great question, around the groups or the committees rather in Group 5. How would contact coordination work around that?
I think that's going to really, so the question was with Group 5, if you're not familiar with that, I know that a lot of people get really segmented in their own groups. Group 5 includes what we think of as the traditional PACs, but it also includes the affinity groups and our caucus groups. So we've really tried to work with those groups over the years in a very similar way to how we work with the other PACs. So we really view those groups as being twofold. One is they're an opportunity to really bring folks together that are of a community or have an affinity with the community and advocate for that and create a sense of being with the organization. But we've also seen them as an opportunity to curate content. So we've been able to build that content into the annual meeting program, and we're assuming that these group coordinators would be able to do that same thing throughout the year with other content media.
Right. And I guess more of a logistical question, but what did we envision for the term limits for these new program coordinators or content coordinators?
Yeah, I think we've kind of decided we probably stick with the current cycle that the other PAC chairs have to start off with. We're not married to that right now, but I mean that's kind of what we've kind of started as a baseline.
Yeah, I think the proposal was a 3-year term or a 4-year term for the chair, 3 years in the role, and then a year in transition. That's for the chair. I don't know about the content coordinators. Are we thinking similar to the existing group coordinator term?
Yeah, I think that's where we're trying to mirror those as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then, Sarah, sort of a follow-up. Do you envision one group kind of feeding into the other? Like, would the program coordinators, would they be in a similar pool, I guess, where a content coordinator might go onto the program committee or vice versa, and they would all potentially be possible program vice chair or program coordinator or program chair, rather, candidates?
So we talked a lot about that actually as the group, and we didn't want to limit it, and we really didn't want to make this kind of a junior group coordinator. You know, we really didn't want to create a scenario where somebody felt like they were in a succession plan or really moving from one role as another. Again, in my mind, it really goes back to that concept of not everybody that is a PAC chair or that's engaged in a PAC wants to go a very specific route for the next leadership step. So I think what we tried to do was leave this open so it really creates an opportunity for individuals to think about what's the right place for them to fit. It's a great opportunity for us as an organization to think about where are our strengths and where could we bring somebody with a certain set of skills in. When we think about who the vice chair and chair of program committee is, I think that really is one that is, as most folks know, we really struggle with that because it becomes a limited pool because it's always great to have somebody who's had some experience. So it really could be an opportunity to look broader for leadership on those two roles.
Jack, following up on what you're saying, I think Adrian McDay makes a great point, too, about staggering the terms for the coordinators. I think that's an excellent idea. And I wanted to follow up to say that this isn't looking at this as a current chair of a committee that aligns very closely with a non-annual meeting. I oversee, information systems and technology, as I mentioned earlier. And there's a lot of content that we have that could that has a lot of very strong impact with tech and transfer. And we don't have a lot of opportunity to engage with the director of that, the programming director there. And it would be, for us, a huge boon to have somebody in the group coordinator role so that it doesn't all fall on our current group coordinator, to have a content coordinator of equal standing and footing who's really looking out to work with, to coordinate directly with whomever is working, whoever is directing the tech and transfer conference, but also thinking of the Innovation Hub, thinking of the tools that we have out there. So speaking directly as a chair of an existing PAC who could see this position as somebody who all the burden doesn't have to fall on an existing position, that it is of equal footing and of a completely different set of skills and interests is really how I'm viewing it, and to not look at it as a leadership path or as a succession line, but really as you were speaking to, Jack, as an alternate way of volunteer work, is a different way for someone to contribute to the organization. And there's a really good opportunity, I think, for that with all of the different areas that we represent. So just my 2 cents, I guess, to that point.
And I'll kick in here as a chair of a committee of a PAC that is very centric to the annual meeting currently. I think it works great in both directions, as Emily was talking about. We're looking forward to being able to have more interaction with, say, SIM and tech transfer, and we've had none before, as well as doing work outside of just the annual conference.
So one of the questions that came through was specifically about the caucuses and whether or not that we're really moving to have the caucuses mirror the PAC structure, or whether or not we're giving guidance out about the structure of the caucus groups, et cetera. And that really isn't part of the plan. So the caucuses each have grown up over the years with a very different feel, very different structures, and very different engagement. So they, in and among themselves, have different operating structures, and I think that will continue. I think one of the things that we always try to do with them is make sure that we're cycling the leadership, so kind of who's serving as chair or the coordinator of those, in the same way that we cycle the PAC coordinators, really to give an opportunity for leadership among everyone in those groups, but also really to think about how are we ensuring that we're getting fresh ideas in. Another question came in about, and it was actually from Opal, so it was really about the idea of when you have when you have worked in the past as PAC chairs, it's usually a little bit easier to get content around the annual meeting, and sometimes a challenge to find somebody that is willing to be a writer, instructor, et cetera. And I think that's really part of why we landed on this structure. I think one of the things that we started to realize is that we were asking too much of some of our leadership, that we have an annual meeting that you're really chasing down content for, and oh, by the way, you're also trying to chase down content for webinars and articles and book chapters and things like that. And so the goal is that really by having somebody else that's concentrating on that really helps spread some of the work a little bit.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think it also gives us a lot of flexibility as far as new content. For example, again, going back to Group 5, if Latino Caucus had an idea but didn't really fit into a session type of content or delivery, but we really need to get it out there, they might go to these group coordinators and begin to get a webinar in place or some writing and help them think differently. That doesn't have to be a session. It could be this other thing, and to really help those other groups just think differently as far as how they can get their information out.
And I think tied to that too, if the group content coordinators are looking at the proficiencies and the competencies, and they're aware of where the needs are in a broader sense for our membership, and they're looking across the offerings as each of the PACs is kind of doing a deep dive, or the caucuses are doing a deep dive in their area of specialty, if you pardon the term, these coordinators are going to be looking across those specialties to make sure that we're addressing the needs in a broader way, and looking for ways to connect them. So it's interdisciplinary in a way to not only look for alternate methods of delivery, but are we addressing all of the necessary components of our competencies and our proficiencies that we're looking to deliver for the membership as a whole, and not just in the meetings, but across, looking at our web resources, looking at our journals and our articles, so that there is a higher level eye that is taking a curricular look at our offerings.
Yes, and sorry to jump in, but you would ask where some of the current guidelines on basically on leadership within committees and other leadership structures are located. And I linked, that link there is directly to the committee handbook, but that does need to be updated as a result of this restructure and as a result of the leadership meeting moving from a December timeline to a June timeline, because that does change up the intent of both meetings a bit. And we have a question from Jonathan Helm. I'll read that aloud here as best I can anyway. I hear the equal footing comments between group coordinators and content coordinators, but it seems inherently unequal when the group coordinators each oversee a group 1 through 6, and the content coordinators are all within a single group, group 7. Were there any other structures considered for connecting the content coordinators to groups 1 through 6? Is there a content coordinator for each group?
Well, we're kind of hoping that the Group 7 chair takes some of that role to make sure that there's cross-pollination and cross-communication between the different groups and make sure that that is viewed, correctly as far as access. So I think that we're going to expand that kind of role with that Group 7 coordinator.
And for clarity, I think the maybe this isn't the question, but the intent is to have the content coordinators each align with a group. So if you're a content coordinator for group 6, you would be working with the group coordinator for 6, and you would be assigned to that group. You wouldn't be revolving or working with any group. You would have an assignment to a specific group. You would be working with them, but your home base would be Group 7. You would be reporting or working with the chair of Group 7, mostly to make sure that as a higher level of content, to make sure that there is the focus is on the types of delivery and a broader set of content, but your focus might be the area that group is representing. So there is an alignment, and where the group coordinator is really focusing on the annual meeting content, the content coordinator is looking at a similar content, but focusing on all the other modalities or the other delivery methods outside of the annual meeting. So it's trying to balance those, and so I hope that answers the question. Maybe I'm not understanding it directly.
We'll give a minute or two for some more questions.
We're grateful for all the feedback and all the wonderful questions. This has been a fascinating group to be participating in, and there's been such wonderful dialogue that we've all shared in there's a lot of interest in this. So it's been a great group to be part of, and so I hope that the comments keep rolling in, and we're grateful for everyone's participation here today.
But also to Jonathan's question too, we looked at multiple structures as far as this whole process and landed with this one and recognizing that 3 years from now we may find that we need to adjust it and have that flexibility.
Yeah.
And speaking to some of the comments before about committee pages, we are working on potential solutions to that. Starting with the boards, so they have a portal on our website. We might make it so that there are either permission pages that only committee members can access, or they might be a little more robust and public. But we'll have updates for you in the coming months on that front.
So there is a specific question of what happens to the current coordinator for Group 7. My assumption is that the current coordinator for Group 7 would continue as we start to evolve this and would really be part of that conversation about what does this look like and how does that structure work. And then as we look for the next Group 7 coordinator, that really becomes part of the conversation from the beginning.
Give another few minutes for people to type out their questions here. I do, in the meantime, want to thank everybody for coming. This is, as Emily said, it's great feedback, and it's also just nice to see you're all engaged enough to attend a webinar that has nothing to do with, your day-to-day jobs. All right, so Robert asks, how will these content coordinators be selected now and in the future once terms are determined?
What was the kind of the behind the scenes, how the magic happens is we've been doing call for interest from a pretty broad, usually from all of our membership, and folks are usually asked about what their past engagement with ACRO is, and then the board looks at that to start thinking about who the right fit is for each of the roles. We've really started that over the last probably 2 years because we really wanted to think about how do we engage a larger group of people in leadership roles. And one of the things that some of you have heard me talking about before at the annual meeting is as we've done that, especially with work groups, we've had literally in the hundreds of people express interest in some of those groups. So I think this is a really great opportunity to think about broadening that because it's an opportunity to think about how do we engage some folks that maybe we haven't before and provide some new opportunities.
And I also think it's the intention that each group will be definitely involved in selecting, especially this first round of content coordinators, whether it be through a vice president or however they're structured, so that everybody feels comfortable with the selection and with the first round of coordinators.
Absolutely. And that's actually something we try to do ongoing. We try to get feedback from the groups, and especially the vice president with portfolio always takes that leadership role for the individual areas.
Looks like one of the participants mentioned the gap between content and delivery, and we had a lengthy discussion, multiple phone calls on that, and saw that gap. And so this hopefully will address some of that. We have these great ideas, but it has no legs, or it falls through because the infrastructure is not there. And so that's really tried to focus on to make sure that there's someone in charge of that make sure that we can find a writer or an instructor or whatever that particular program or idea needs, as well as the infrastructure to make it happen. And so that's the big gap that we tried to fill, because we've always got great ideas, but they seem to fall through because the infrastructure and the support was not there.
So one of the things I'll say for folks, it looks like we're starting to kind of wind down on questions, is this doesn't have to end here. So if you think of other things, anyone from the group, not just the presenters today, but many of you or most of you have relationships with somebody on this work group, feel free to reach out to any of us to ask questions. And remember that we'll also have opportunities to talk more about it in a couple of months at the annual meeting.
It does seem as though questions are drying up, so I suppose unless somebody wants to type something in the next minute or so, we're probably wrapped up. But as Jack said, it's not a finished process, so feel free to email feedback and stuff to the ACRO office or any of the presenters. And I don't know if you guys have some closing comments.
I just want to thank the work group and for all of their work on this. This was a lot of work, but they also did it in a fairly short amount of time. So I'm really appreciative of that. So thanks to them for all their work. And a huge thanks to Paul for coming out of retirement, essentially, and also for Jennifer Minke from the board, who was the co-chair with Paul.
Agreed.
Thank you, Jack. And this has been really a great group, and so we had a lot of fun, and it's exciting to see the possibilities, and I know this group is excited to see the future, because we can really see some things happening potentially with these changes, and so we appreciate the board support and the ACRO office support with these initiatives.
And somebody just, Adrian asked who's on the work group, so that's there. And if you need emails from any of those individuals, feel free to reach out to me. I'm typing my email in right now. And I'll make sure that your questions and comments get passed along. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay warm.